So this session, similar to the rest of them, we will have 4 representatives which will be speaking today, all on the kind of general theme of safer streets. And our first speaker today is Darienne Boyd from Cumbria. So Darienne, I'll hand it over to you.
Hello, good morning. My dissertation was completed on why do police officers consider leaving the profession and the interplay between job demand, stress, burnout, psychological distress, and sorry, just get my screens up. Just next slide, please. And just again, sorry. So a little bit about me. I am currently finished my 3 years now in Cumbria Police. I've got a strong passion for operational policing. I love response. I'm currently a tutor constable. I previously worked as a teaching assistant, and I think those sort of life skills have driven me towards this career. A big part of what I do every day is just general policing, taking care of other officers, and I see it every day, officers leaving the job and the reasons why, which is why I complete this dissertation. So if you go on to the next slide, please. So the research study, so the reason that I chose this topic, because as a frontline police officer who's got 3 years of experience, I've observed the emotional strain, organisational pressure and wellbeing challenges faced by officers daily. Resignations have been on the rise both nationally and locally, and I've personally seen how losing experienced officers affects not just general operational performance, but team morale and continuity. So this study explores why officers are leaving the profession and which organisational elements are influencing those choices, as well as how we can, as a police force, retain staff and keep those officers with the experience that then in turn make our organisation better. And I want to stress as well that this study is not a criticism, it's a reflective and constructive analysis of where meaningful improvements can be made. We go on to the next slide. So what are Cumbria Police already doing to tackle the issue? So there's already a lot that Cumbria Police are already doing to support the officer resignation issue. I won't go into all of them, we'd probably be here all day, but some of them are above. So stay interviews are a big one. So if an officer was decided to leave, they could complete an interview to express their reasons for leaving, and supervisors will discuss an approach to keep the officer inside of the organisation. Demobilise training, there's been a huge development of TRIM in the last couple of years, looking at trauma on a longer approach to support officers. There's now additional payments which have been made, especially for those in firearms, as well as additional payments for officers who are in more rural areas. Within Cumbria, we have 4 divisions. Those in Kendal and Barrow do get additional payments due just because of the lack of officers, and that is then in turn getting more transferees over, as well as retaining more staff. We also do sort of specific operations to manage workload. So there's an operation called OpTrek. Officers can request an overtime shift on their day off to catch up on paperwork or any inquiries. But the main focus on this study is workload and what can we do to manage officer workloads. We also have other sort of things like the visibility rota, so senior leadership visibility is a priority in Cumbria. All officers and staff or inspectors or above are required to attend a minimum of 1 briefing per week, and uniformed inspectors must complete a full tour of duty every 6 weeks. So this essentially builds approachability and helps identify areas of improvement, so any officer can join and sort of express their concerns or dislikes of what's going on at the moment. As a response officer, before completing this study, I wasn't actually aware of some of these initiatives, such as the visibility rota. We also have another one called Momentum on there, which is another leadership scheme. I think it's important that, you know, we have all these great things out there that our forces need to be sharing this with their frontline officers and making sure that we have the opportunity to to complete things if we would like to. If we just go on to the next slide. So the aims of the study were to identify the extent of voluntary resignations among police officers and to examine the underlying causes of including workload, leadership, organisational culture, and explore the implications of officer wellbeing and organisational commitment. So I wanted to investigate the organisational factors contributing to officers' decisions to leave, including workload, shift patterns, leadership and culture, to examine the impact of these factors on officer wellbeing, motivation and organisational commitment, and to develop a realistic evidence-based policing recommendations to improve retention and wellbeing within Cumbria Police. Next slide, please. So throughout the study, these were the strongest themes. So we've got shift changes, excessive workloads, work-life balance, burnout and leadership. Shift unpredictability stood out as a major factor. In 2024, in Cumbria Police, there were 1,902 shift changes affecting only 75 officers. So within those, 1,827 of those officers are being repeatedly changing their shifts. Some individuals saw dozens of alterations to their duty patterns, cancelled rest days and short notice changes, creating significant stress and disruption to family and recovery time. Repeated shift changes were a major issue, and within the Federation regulations, Regulation 2022 requires at least 3 months' notice for duty changes to allow officers to plan and maintain work-life balance. However, the force often fails to meet this standard, with last-minute alterations and cancelled rest days causing stress, fatigue and disruption to personal life. Workload was another major issue, with officers feeling stretched across increasing demands that they just can't manage. Many experienced emotional exhaustion and reduced job satisfaction. Officers reported feeling unsupported due to limited supervisory visibility, which contributed to low morale and disconnection from organisational values. And just next slide, please. So across 30 exit interviews that were completed with Cumbria Police Federation, 7 officers specifically referenced shift unpredictability, cancelled rest days and work-life balance as major reasons for leaving. Some of the quotations were, "I felt like I had no choice to leave, the constant shift changes made life impossible, and I became so exhausted and demoralised that the job no longer felt safe." Voluntary resignations in Cumbria is currently at 3.4%, and this is the highest recorded rate for Cumbria Constabulary. And the resignations rose from 28 to 30 officers per year to 71 in 2022. And these reflect the consistent organisational pressures rather than this being just an isolated dissatisfaction. And just next slide, please. So policing is a career built on public service and professionalism, but officers are not limitless resources. Experience takes years to build, and losing skilled personnel affects operational capability and well-being across teams. Improving retention is about ensuring officers feel safe and are able to balance the demands of the jobs within the realities of life. And I'll just go on to my recommendations now, which is the next slide. So recommendations would be improving work-life balance, leadership visibility and improving workload and resourcing, as well as rebuilding organisational trust through communication. So enforcing shift predictability and Regulation 2022. So maintaining constant supervision, embedding wellbeing into daily practice, reviewing workload, strengthening leadership and building clear pathways for progression. Communication should be constant and transparent and ensure officers feel informed and valued. And to sort of support officers with their workload, I would suggest that we build some sort of stepping stone. I know other forces use the response model, which means their frontline police officers are not investigating crimes. However, within Cumbria Police, we go to all of the response jobs. We keep and retain those crimes and we progress them to CPS. That workload is just currently too unmanageable for officers. They're stretched on 20 to 25 investigations. You know, they've got CPS action plans, all sorts of things that they just cannot manage, as well as constantly going to jobs. So if we could develop an investigational team, potentially such as a CID stepping stone, officers that are potentially on the fast track DC route could potentially go into this investigation team, take on some of the investigations and then progress those to CPS on behalf of response officers so we can focus purely on response. And if you just go to the next slide, that is the end of the presentation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. That was really good. I haven't seen any questions in the Q&A so far, so I'll just ask one just while we wait in case anyone wants to put one in there while I'm speaking. Thank you for telling us a really specific kind of idea about recommendation there about perhaps developing that CID stepping stone idea. Could you tell us a little bit about whether or not you think that is achievable within Cumbria? Has it happened anywhere else that you're aware of? And do you know if it's gone well? Would it require a lot of effort to kind of implement that? Do you think that?
So I currently work in the north of Cumbria, which is the Carlisle region. I'm aware that in the south region, so Penrith and Kendal, they've currently started an investigation team. The problems that we're having is that where are we getting those officers from? So, you know, we're potentially taking some of them from response to then go into this investigation team. However, the idea that I propose is you fast track DC routes, they do 6 months on response and then they go straight upstairs. From the feedback I've heard, they're not ready to be going straight upstairs to CID yet. So it could be potential that they do their 6 months on response and then they do another 6 months in the investigation team, you know, developing those investigation skills and getting those outcomes to CPS. But I am aware that it is working in the South region and there is some good feedback coming from it. It's just hard to implement it in the rest of the force as we just don't have the officers to pull from response because that's where we're needed. So because the demand is so high.
Mm-hmm. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Got a question here from Matt. What would good leadership visibility look like? Would it be physical presence? And at what level?
Yeah, I think definitely more physical presence. I think it can be hard for officers when they see, you know, big bosses coming into the room. It does make you a little bit nervous, but I think that's because sometimes they only come in every couple of months. You know, if they were to come into our briefings daily, potentially just put in like in the Teams chat something really casual. Does anybody need anything? Is anybody struggling? You know, you're always free to send me an email. I think a lot of the time response officers don't even know who their leadership teams are above a inspector level. So just making sure that we all know who you are, what area you work in, and if there is anything that you could potentially help us with, you know, are you approachable? Can we come and speak to you?
Brilliant. Okay, and then I'll just do this last one because I think you might be able to answer it quickly. What is the main reason for so many changes in shift patterns and last minute cancellation of rest days? Do you feel like that's linked to understaffing and or absence?
I believe it's to understaffing. So the way that our shift works, we have 5 shifts, and if one shift has a lack of officers, they will pull officers from the shift that takes over to then cover. So you're constantly pulling officers from one section to another section to cover them, but then the section that you've just pulled them from, then you need to pull from another section. So it's a bit like robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you so much. We'll leave it there just to keep it on time. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.